I want to start this deep dive by asking you to just look at your hand. Seriously. Hold it up and look at it. You see skin, knuckles, maybe a scar. Now, if I asked you what that hand is made of, you wouldn't hesitate. You'd say cells. And if I pushed you, you'd say molecules. And then eventually you'd hit what we think of as the bedrock of reality, the atom.
The atom, right. It's the fundamental building block. You can't really argue with an atom.
That's what I thought. It feels so undeniable, a hard fact. But here's the thing that kept me up last night reading through this research you sent. For a huge chunk of scientific history, the atom, it wasn't considered a thing, not a physical object. It was basically a math trick.
A convenient fiction, that's what skeptics called it.
A fiction. And this applies to so much of what we think of as real. The gene, the subconscious,
Yeah.
the laws of physics. The sources we're digging into today argue we didn't just discover these things, we kind of built them.
We built them with language. That really is the core argument here.
And that brings us to our word of the day, reification. Now, I have to be honest, when I first saw that word, I had a flashback to some dusty philosophy lecture.
Yeah.
It sounds heavy.
It does sound intimidating, I get that. But the actual mechanism is something you do every single day. It's incredibly sleek. Reification is just the process of turning a pattern into a thing.
A pattern into a thing.
Yeah. You see something happening over and over, a process, a behavior, a statistical regularity, and you give it a name. And the moment you name it, you turn it into a causal agent.
So you take a verb or just something that happens a lot and you force it to become a noun.
Precisely. But it's not just about grammar. It's ontological. You're giving that pattern the status of reality. And what's wild about these sources is how they track this happening across, well, every major field. Biology, chemistry, physics, even psychology. We're going to see how we essentially socially created the furniture of the universe.
That is a massive claim. The furniture of the universe, atoms, genes, are social creations.
To a certain degree, yes. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace how we hallucinated reality into existence, and crucially, why that's actually a good thing.
Well, that's a good thing.
Without it, we'd probably still be in the Dark Ages.
All right, let's test this. Let's start with biology, because I think the story of the gene is maybe the clearest example in the papers. Most of us have this mental image of a gene, right? Like a little bead on a string of DNA, a physical object.
A little negative information. That's the high school textbook version.
But the research makes it clear that for a long, long time, geneticists were working completely blind. They didn't have the microscopes. They hadn't seen a double helix.
No, not at all. This was the era of statistical regularities. I mean, think about Gregor Mendel and his pea plants. He wasn't looking at DNA. He was looking at math.
Probabilities.
Probabilities.
Yeah.
If you cross this tall plant with that short plant, you get a tall plant 75% of the time. It was a numbers game.
So when those early scientists were using words like factors or units of heredity, they weren't saying there was a little physical thing inside the cell doing the work.
Not necessarily. For a lot of them, those were just placeholders. It's like when we talk about the economy, you can't point to it, you can't touch it, just as a handy term for a trillion different transactions. They were tracking patterns of inheritance, and they needed a word for the algebra. It was algebra, not anatomy.
But then the shift happens, and this is the part I underlined like 3 times. The sources argue the gene became a real thing linguistically before it became a real thing physically.
That's the key. We usually think science works the other way around, right? Discovery first, naming second, you find a new planet, you name it. But here, the language hardened first. As those patterns became reproducible, every time you ran the experiment, the math held up. Scientists stopped talking about patterns.
And the notes point to the grammar. This is so fascinating because it's subtle. You can actually watch these sentence structures change in the research papers over a few decades.
You absolutely can. They went from these passive descriptions of probability to really active sentences. So instead of traits are inherited according to pattern X, they started writing.
The gene determines the trait.
The gene determines exactly.
That's a huge leap.
It's massive. The second you make gene the subject of an active verb, you've given it agency. You're saying, this isn't just a pattern anymore. This is an actor. This is a little machine doing work.
And that changes how you do science. Because if it's an actor...
You can go look for it. Exactly. Once the word was reified into a noun, it started to direct the experiments. Scientists started asking, okay, if the gene is a thing, how big is it? Where is it? What's it made of? The language created the very framework that led to finding DNA.
So they basically spoke it into existence and then went out and found it to prove themselves right.
In a way, yeah. The reification acted like a searchlight. Without that word, that thing in their minds, they might never have known what to look for.
Okay, I can see that for biology. It's messy, life is complex. But let's move to something harder. Chemistry. The atom.
The bedrock.
Surely the atom wasn't a social construct. I mean, I'm leaning on a table made of atoms. If I hit it, it hurts.
You are. But if you were leaning on that table in the late 19th century, which isn't that long ago, and you were talking to someone like Ernst Mach or Wilhelm Ostwald, these giants of physics and chemistry, they would laugh at you.
They didn't believe in atoms.
They believed the math worked. That's the nuance. They saw atomic theory as a hypothetical construct. To them, atoms were just convenient fictions.
Convenient fiction. Wow. That sounds like something you call a lie you tell a kid to get them to go to sleep.
Well, you have to understand their philosophy. They were strict empiricists. Their view was basically, I can't see an atom, I can't touch an atom. Therefore, to claim it exists is metaphysics, not science. They thought it was sloppy thinking. They just wanted to describe what they saw and not invent invisible monsters to explain it.
So how do we get from sloppy thinking to the periodic table in every classroom? How did the fiction become fact?
Reproducibility, again. Specifically, kinetic theory and things like Brownian motion. You know when you see dust motes dancing in a sunbeam?
Sure, that random jiggling.
That's it. Einstein and others showed that the only way to explain that random jiggling of particles in a fluid was if they were being bombarded by tiny, invisible, discrete packets of matter. Atoms. The predictions based on atoms being real were just too accurate to ignore.
And as soon as that evidence tipped the scales, the language shifted.
Immediately. And look, the verbs. This is my favorite part. Once the atom was reified, scientists started saying atoms collide. They vibrate. They bind.
Those are physical actions. Ghosts don't collide.
Exactly. If something can collide, it has to be solid. If it can vibrate, it takes up space. These verbs, they embedded the atom into the causal fabric of the universe. It went from a fiction to the most real thing there is, all because we needed a noun for the thing that was doing the colliding.
It's amazing how much work the verbs are doing. It's like grammar is the glue holding reality together.
It really is. But wait, the sources say physics didn't stop there. They took this reification ball and just kept running with it. Maybe too far.
This is where we get into the really weird stuff. This is where reification starts to fray at the edges. We're talking about quantum mechanics.
The wave function.
The wave function. Now, this is a mathematical concept, right?
Yeah.
It was created to explain the behavior of quantum particles. But here's the catch, and the sources are very clear about this. It is almost universally accepted that a wave function cannot be observed.
Not just we don't have good enough tools, but impossible to see, period.
Even in principle. You can't measure a wave function directly. You can only measure the outcome of its collapse. And yet, listen to how physicists talk about it.
Well, yeah. They talk about it like it's a physical wave. It propagates, it interferes, it collapses.
They treat it as a real entity. They've reified a piece of math because they need it to explain their results. But this rubs some people the wrong way, specifically Albert Einstein. I was hoping we'd get to the Einstein drama. The sources bring up the EPR paradox. And usually when you hear paradox, your brain tunes out. But this is really a fight over what the word reality even means.
It is. In 1935, Einstein and two colleagues wrote this paper that was basically one giant subtweet aimed at quantum mechanics. They had an ontological objection.
They felt the reification had gone too far.
They felt it was sloppy. Einstein wanted clear rules. He hated all this fuzzy, unobservable, maybe it's there, maybe it's not stuff. So in the paper, they actually tried to define reality. They called it the reality criterion.
I have the definition here. It's dense, but it's so specific. A sufficient condition for the reality of a physical quantity is the possibility of predicting it with certainty without disturbing the system.
It sounds complex, but the test is actually pretty simple. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine a box with a marble inside.
Okay, good box.
Einstein says the color of that marble is real. Only if I can tell you exactly what color it is, predict it with 100% certainty without opening the box, without disturbing the system at all.
Because if I have to open the box to see the color, maybe my act of opening it made it that color.
Exactly. If you have to disturb it to measure it, then you can't say that property was real beforehand. It was created by your interaction.
And that creates a massive conflict with the wave function.
Huge, because in quantum mechanics, you cannot know the state of a system without disturbing it. So by Einstein's very strict definition, the wave function isn't a real thing. It fails the test.
but physicists use it every single day.
They do, and this just highlights that reality in science isn't some binary on-off switch. It's a negotiation. We accept the wave function as real because it's useful, not because it passes Einstein's strict box test. We've sort of socially agreed to lower the bar for reality because the math is just too good.
That is slightly unsettling. Feels like we're walking on very thin ice.
Welcome to quantum physics.
All right, let's pivot. We've covered physical things, genes, atoms, particles, but the sources then take this hard left turn right into the mind.
Yes.
I don't usually associate Jung with hard scientific rigor. I think of dream journals, archetypes, myths. But the argument here is that Jung was a master of reification.
He had to be. I mean, you have to remember the context. In the early 20th century, psychology was being completely dominated by behaviorism.
Behaviorism,
Well,
that's the black box theory.
Right. The behaviorists, like Skinner, they said, look, we can't see your thoughts, we can't measure your feelings, so for science, they don't matter. All we care about are inputs and outputs. Stimulus and response, if you can't measure it, it's not science.
So if you wanted to study the mind, the actual internal world, you were seen as unscientific,
Yeah.
as just telling stories.
Exactly. So Jung comes along with this idea of the complex, like an inferiority complex. But he knows he can't just say it's a feeling. He needs to make it a thing. He has to reify it to compete with the hard sciences.
But how? He couldn't put a complex under a microscope.
No. So he used the word association test.
Oh, I've seen this in movies. I say cloud, you say.
Rain.
Right. But Jung wasn't just listening to the words.
No, and that's the trick. He was measuring the time it took you to respond, your heart rate, your galvanic skin response, how much you sweat. He found that when people hit a sore spot, a complex, there was a measurable, reproducible delay, a physiological reaction.
Ah, there's that word again. Reproducible.
He found quantitative signatures. And because he had numbers that repeated, he could slap a table of data down and say, look, this isn't just a mood, this is a structure in the psyche. It has objective reality because it produces measurable data.
He used the data to turn a mental state into a causal agent, a thing.
And in doing so, he basically saved the study of the inner mind. The source notes that this part of history is often forgotten. Jung wasn't just exploring dreams, he was fighting a war for the reality of the psyche. And reification was his weapon.
It's kind of genius. If you want to study the ghost, first you have to prove the ghost can move the furniture.
Precisely.
We've covered a lot of ground. Statistical ghosts into genes, math tricks into atoms, timing delays into mental complexes. But I have to ask the big, uncomfortable so what question.
Yep.
If we're just inventing words and turning them into things, is it all just a game? Are we just deluding ourselves? If the map isn't the territory, are we just all staring at the map, pretending it's the ground?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If reification is a social act, does that mean all of science is just a will-told story?
It feels a little shaky when you line it all up like that.
But the More About Reification source gives a very strong answer to this. It argues that reification isn't a mistake, it's a tool. I mean, think about the alternative. Without these words, how would we even talk?
It would be a nightmare. I couldn't say the atom bonded. I'd have to say there is a recurring probability distribution of mass energy that appears to be localizing near another probability.
Exactly. You'd never get anything done. You'd be paralyzed by description. Reification gives us a vocabulary. It gives us handles to grab onto the world. It allows us to say words like cause, mechanism, law.
It's like a user interface on a computer. That's the image that just popped into my head.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, I know when I click a solder on my desktop, there isn't a little cardboard folder inside my hard drive. It's just bits of data scattered all over a disk. But if I didn't have that icon, if I didn't reify that data into an object I can manipulate, I couldn't use the computer.
That is a perfect analogy. Reification creates an interface with reality. And the test of that interface isn't, is it perfectly philosophically true? The test is, does it work?
The source mentions prediction and intervention.
Right. Does treating the gene as a real thing let us cure a disease? Yes. Does treating the atom as real let us build a nuclear reactor? Yes. Does treating a complex as real help a therapist guide a patient? Yes.
So reification is what makes science actionable. It turns a fuzzy pattern into a solid lever we can pull.
Exactly. It bridges that gap between the raw, messy data of the universe and our human minds. We build these structures so we can live in them. It's not about truth with a capital T. It's about utility.
It really flips your whole perspective. We walk around thinking the world is made of objects, and we just go around discovering them. But the more you look at these sources, it seems like the world is made of patterns. And the objects are just the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of it all.
We give the patterns a name, and in doing so, we give them the power to act.
So here's my final thought for you to chew on. Next time you see a headline about some new discovery, scientists find a new particle, or researchers identified the neural circuit for sadness, just ask yourself this. Did they find it? Or did they just finally figure out the perfect name for the pattern and by naming it, make it real?
That's the question.
Thanks for taking this trip into the construction of reality with us. This was a real mind bender.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.